John, I have never been better to be on the air with you here in Indianapolis, a place where so many of my dreams have come true.
The Ride with JMV on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Hey, today is a big day. Tonight is a big night. And I'll be completely honest. There are a lot of things. I talk about this all the time. There has been little to zero good fortune going on around here forever. And today we get to talk about the Pacers into the postseason for the first time since 2020, the first time within the bubble. So you're going to get a rockin' like dockin' field house which feels so good to me. That has been so missing. Now, they've worked at that. They've won games. It's not so much good fortune as we're going to witness later on tonight. And believe me, you embrace it all because it has been such a long time. I mean, a long time since the good fortune has dropped into your lap. So Caitlin Clark later on tonight will be the number 1 overall selection by the Indiana Fever. Definitively speaking, in the WNBA draft, that is the good fortune that we're talking about. Aaliyah Boston a year ago was good fortune. It is time. Hopefully this is a corner changer because you need that too. You need sound decisions. You need good play, high level, it all, but you also need good fortune. And that's what you're going to witness later on tonight. That is a good thing. Cannot wait to see it. We were just talking about that here in the transition between Aquarian Company and us about that good fortune and how long it has been around here. And I do view it differently because the Fever still will have something to prove. It's one thing to draft Caitlin Clark later on tonight, who is all over everything, including Saturday Night Live. And I thought it was great. I'm a big fan of their weekend update. I think Jost and Che are pretty good. Now, I don't get a chance to watch because I'm just finishing up the Saturday show when it comes on. But normally, like anything else, you can go back and watch via social media. And it's always pretty funny. I think they're pretty talented. And that was a good piece that we saw between Che and Caitlin Clark on Saturday Night Live. And I love the fact that she brought like 3 of her teammates with her. And also for SNLs, the Ryan Gosling SNLs are always some because you bring back Kate McKinnon, who is hilarious. But now this all equates to incredibly good fortune for the Fever. And we'll see if maybe now we're going to be in a different category, down a different path. It has been few and stinking far between. I can speak for you. I don't even think I need to ask. It has been a long time since you've had good fortune. And believe me, a lot of the misfortune that has gone on has been decision-making, has been level of play. All mixed up. It's not like, oh, woe is us. We're just incredibly unlucky like Schleprock here. A lot of the decision-making also has led to it, but hopefully this good fortune translates into something great for the Fever, hopefully going and working your way into the 6th seed. And then winning out yesterday. I thought yesterday's game was fantastic. I know it was a Hawks, and I know the Pacers had tuned the Hawks, 3 times already this season? That's how you go out. When I mention about the Final 8, they go 6-2 over their Final 8. I wasn't talking about Friday night in Cleveland, for example, and the way they handled things late. And I know Cleveland was a better team. Cleveland was playing for something. Yeah, Friday night's game was not anything we wanted to talk too much about today. But to get to where we are, you had to get that win over Atlanta. And there are moments in which the Pacers still play that role of, all right, they can build a lead. And believe me, in this era of basketball, basically on any level, when you get 15 to 18 points, remember how, oh my goodness, the game is over. It is nothing nowadays, really on different levels. You come from our era, you get up 10 points. Oh my goodness, they're up 10 points. How will we ever come back? And nowadays it's like, all right, 35 seconds later, you're within one possession. But there is no team out there that can lose a lead quicker than the Pacers. And I don't know if that has anything to do with the quickness of the pace as it does just defensively. Defensively, you want them to be better. Defensively, you certainly want them to be better late. But they can go through a couple of moments in which they're non-existent. Give you a great example. Yesterday, when they get up, 15, 16, 18 points, whatever it was, and then immediately Atlanta cuts into it. And a lot of that was with Miles on the bench with 2 fouls. When Tony Brothers delivered that second foul, that kind of mysterious foul, and Miles went to the bench, and then you've got the proverbial layup line happening. And oftentimes it can happen anyway. Now, that's something that Miles, I think, has been playing better defensively, and that is coming over to help while also bearing in mind that 85% of the time when he comes over and helps, there's going to be a drop-down pass. You got to stay into play. And not just the guy that you're coming over and helping. That happens all the time because these guys can't stay basically in front of anybody. But when he comes over to help, you are better at, in this scrambled defensive situation, in understanding that somebody's probably going to pocket pass, going to drop one off, and then you're going to have to come over and help again because that's going to be your guy that's not going to have anybody on him. Or you're going to have to stay in the play because if the shot does go up, you got to make sure that there's no weak side, rebound, put back, dunk. Well, he's been getting a lot better. Like yesterday afternoon, it was a great game for him. Great game for him. Great game for Siakam. But you got to stay in the play, and that matters with this team defensively. They're not good enough not to stay within the play. I think Miles has been doing a better job of that defensively. Now, where the Pacers are coming up on Sunday, we will find out the time in which they will play game number 1 in Milwaukee on Sunday. That is a long period of time for Giannis and his calf to get better. I saw Shams a little bit earlier today regarding his report that there's a lot of doubt that Giannis will participate in game number 1. And as I mentioned to the fellas a little bit earlier, too, what happens is if Giannis doesn't play, right, in game number 1, all of a sudden now there is going to be even more pressure because people will believe that that is a game the Pacers should win. Not, well, they could win if they did this. They might win if they did that, but they should win. All of a sudden you go into should-win status. And that has been an issue this year. Think about all the should-win status games and how it's driven you nuts, how it's driven me nuts. It's been with the, I don't know. It could go either way. Those games have been really good for the most part this year. It is you look at it and they should win, is where sometimes things get a little bit off. You think about the magnitude of that game against Miami a week ago. You think about the magnitude of the game yesterday against Atlanta. And then especially without Giannis. Let's just say, for example, on Sunday, there is no Giannis playing. Think about the level of importance. I mean, for one, it's a playoff game. But for two, all of a sudden the expectations go from, all right, maybe you could steal a game to you better damn straight steal this without Giannis playing and all these other guys that have stunk it up. And Damian Lillard hitting 2 shots and Chris Middleton struggling and having to go to the bench and hoping to get a double-double out of Bobby Portis and his eyeballs. And then you have another aspect that's also lurking. And that is the relative, I don't want to say ease, that's the wrong way to go. But let's just say the Pacers have taken care of Milwaukee this season. Right? They have. In terms of winning games, you can count on, 4-1 this year against Milwaukee? And you could tell two things. Number one, both sides are dramatically different. You got Pascal Siakam now. If you're the Pacers, they have Doc Rivers now instead of Adrian Griffin as the head coach. And they're going to have an injured Giannis. You can make the argument, and I always hated this argument because it's on the schedule, then go ahead and play. But people would argue that the Pacers took the in-season or early in the season, they took that more hardcore against Milwaukee, whereas maybe it was a lighter touch that the Bucks went with because they were a favorite, one of the favorites in the Eastern Conference, one of the favorites in the NBA. Thus, maybe not going at it as hard. And if you remember, in a couple of those games, Giannis actually was asked about the Pacers and why the Pacers give the Bucks so many issues, and he credited the pace. He said, listen, we were just out of gas at the end of these games. There's another question mark you have to go with. Are the Pacers going to be able to maintain in the ballpark of pace that wins them so many games? That really is the difference between them being a really good team or them being average or below. You can make two arguments on that, too. Maintaining that pace being one and late game stops being the other. Man, they can score at any moment. At the beginning of the game, they can score down the stretch in late game situations, but can you get late game stops? But maintaining the up and down type of play that everybody loves and is a key reason why the Pacers find themselves in the playoff position in which they are, and especially historically speaking, you go to the postseason and things slow down. Things are ratcheted up. And defense becomes more of a priority. That certainly is not in the Pacers' wheelhouse. What is, to me, one thing that you're able to control is what you do late. You have to. That separates you from a good team. It's one thing to make the postseason. It's another to advance against a team like Milwaukee. You're going to have to do some things that maybe aren't as characteristic to your season during the regular season. You're going to have to do those things in the postseason. You're going to have to do those things beginning on Sunday against Milwaukee. I mentioned being able to maintain, getting out, running, but also late game situations to where you can get some stops. It is a lot different. And then you have to add in that there was a lot back and forth this year. Yeah, Nesmith and the foul, and then Bobby Portis going crazy. You obviously had the whole ball situation. Hey, that was the game ball. Giannis's brother having to be held back so he wouldn't come out and fight after that Nesmith foul. By the way, did you see the video of Giannis's brother missing that dunk in the bench of the Bucks? That's classic. But you have a storyline. You have a soap opera. I was trying to think of other matchups in round number one. Is there anything that is close to, even before they tip it up in game number one coming up on Sunday, that already has a lot of things working? I mean, you had it's Tyrese Halliburton time, which is a signature of Damian Lillard, and then Lillard having to respond to, hey, did you see Halliburton going with your signature move? And really, that's what makes the NBA postseason so hellaciously fun. You always had that with the Pacers and the Knicks. We were the Hicks. It was great to be the Hicks. It seems like that any memorable series in the postseason with the Pacers, there was other stuff that might be working. Stuff that wasn't necessarily basketball stuff, and that's what you got going right here. I don't know how many of these other series might. Maybe you go out west, and with the play-in, because the talent level and the team recognition is so high, maybe you could find it there. But you have a legitimate soap opera with the Pacers and the Bucks. I would much rather have the Bucks than I would the Knicks right now. Anybody agree? A lot of people were suggesting, yeah, I want to see the Pacers and the Knicks. And I don't even know if you want the Cavaliers. The Cavaliers at full strength. I mean, you had Allen going big. You had Donovan Mitchell going big. And the guy that drives me most nuts would be Karis LeVert, because when that dude was here, he could not hit a shot to save my life. And off the bench for the Cavaliers, as he did on Friday, scoring, going to the basket, little mid-range game, fade stuff going on. But as far as the possibilities that did loom, the lowest of those percentages would have been Milwaukee. And I would have to think, if you're a Pacer fan, that's the one you would go with. And even if you don't look at the regular season dominance of the Pacers over the Bucks, you do look at, if your elite level star is compromised in any way, what do you do? You know, putting the beat down on the Bucks during the regular season is one thing with Giannis, but then without him, trying to do that without him. You got that, and you got Marcus Johnson and the whole flopper stuff. If you remember. Yeah, Marcus Johnson. Marcus Johnson, the former player, he was on Jordan's wall with the poster, if you remember, and was also played Raymond in White Men Can't Jump. That Marcus Johnson. You have a ready-made first-round series. You got a great soap opera going. I love what Rick Carlisle had to say yesterday, too. Rick Carlisle talked about, hey, you know, it's not just about getting to the postseason. We have a certain level of expectations. I have been telling you this forever. When so many said, yeah, you know what, this is not the year, or you're going to be better next year, or better in 2 years, you're going to wait further down the road, man. You guys have waited so damn long. I guess I would have to give it up to your patience, but I have zero patience. The first time since 2020, and that was in the bubble, that certainly didn't have the same type of feel. Now, I'm over patience. I'm over patience with the Pacers. I'm over patience with the Colts. I'm over patience with IU, all of it. At some point, you got to stop talking about what takes place 3 years down the road and think about what can take place right now. And that was the message yesterday Rick Carlisle gave. I know it feels really good right now, and everybody's having a great time on Fan Appreciation Day, but now it's really time to clock in and go to work. I mentioned this with Indiana State. They were able to, this season, unearth a level of fandom that they either had forgotten about or had no idea it did exist. And Pacer fans are always out there, don't get me wrong, but I think you have another opportunity because you're still, to many, in ahead of schedule / surprise mode. You have such a tremendous opportunity to build off of that. Whether you're sitting out there right now and you didn't get a chance to watch because you have a squabble with Bally, or it was a struggle, or you can't find it, or we'll wait until they start winning. I mean, all of that, to me, is on the table right now. You have the opportunity to develop, bring back, in this case, I'm assuming, bring back a lot of the fans that may have bowed out, maybe not paying too much attention, but you also have the opportunity to stir something legitimately up with interest in mind that we haven't seen around here in a long time. And damn straight, I'm happy. I'm ready for it because it has been too long. I know the Colts are always going to be different, although this year. And by the way, too, DeForest Buckner got extended. I'm sure we'll talk about that with Stephen Holder coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. Well, we now less than 2 weeks away from the NFL draft. We'll hit that, but DeForest Buckner got extended. And as people have said, you got the band back together. And that's something that has to work this year. There's no way around it. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But the Colts fans seemingly always hang. It's like the whole rebuilding with the Pacer fans. And I know most people out there don't have the love, the deeply rooted love of basketball as I do. But you have an opportunity now on so many different levels to create something we have not seen in a long time around here. And there's nothing wrong with an us versus everybody and us versus them type of deal. Roll with it. A lot of good fortune going on. But you got to make sure with that good fortune. It's like with Caitlin Clark. Yeah, it's so fortunate and it's great and everybody's talking about her and you get 36 to 40 nationally televised games. But then you got to go to work and you got to prove all this to be accurate hype, understood hype. Then you got to prove that. You know what? And for the WNBA, good for them. So they go drafting tonight, and then, hell, I think mid-May they start. So you're going to get a turnaround for that product relatively quickly. So you get good fortune, but you also have to back that up. You know, luck, if you will. You're going to back that up with winning. And you're hoping that winning with the Pacers and being where they are, I think you can kind of look at it with Giannis. Yeah, even with a 4-1 advantage over the course of the season, you can look at this situation with Giannis and go, all right, well, they played well this season. More times than not. There have been disappointments there, don't get me wrong, but you're the 6th seed in the NBA, and if you're going to get a first-round matchup, here's some good fortune, and here's why. It's a team that you've played really well against. It's a team whose elite-level star has a problematic calf. That's when playing well develops that luck or that good fortune I'm talking about. All that comes to a head for the Pacers beginning on Sunday and then later on tonight for the Fever and drafting of Caitlin Clark. I got a lot to hit on today. Certainly yesterday in that win over the Hawks, Pacers in against the Bucks. Tony East going to join us coming up at the top of the hour. I'm sure he has crunched ample numbers, which is good, involving this matchup. I just love it. I love NBA matchups where there is more than just people dribbling and shooting. I like it when there is some melodrama created outside the court or by virtue of what has taken place on the court. And this is lousy with soap opera-esque atmosphere. I love it. Oh, you do too. Don't get me wrong. I just care about basketball, JMV. That's all that matters to me is the basketball. Baloney. I was around here in the 90s. I know how you felt. Maybe it wasn't you that drove your John Deere downtown right next to Market Square Arena, but somebody did. You'll love it. What are we giving away today, James? James is going to look it up. Sorry, James, I didn't mean to ask you about something you're completely unaware of right here. Please tell me that there's something in there.
We are giving away Beat, a celebration of King Crimson tickets.
Oh, we are we? Okay. All right. When is that? Where is that?
That is Wednesday, October 30th at Old National Center.
I love it. Yes. Shout out to our guy, Jimi Hendrix, who used to be All of our guys at Live Nation are fantastic. We'll do it a little bit later on. We got stuff to give away. We got a busy week for you as well, so let's go ahead and get started at 239-1070, shall we? Tony East, 4 o'clock hour. Stephen Holder, NFL-wise. DeForest Buckner gets extended. We'll go over that as we edge closer and closer to the NFL draft. I'm sorry. But the Masters, Scotty Scheffler is so good that the Masters was boring as hell. That's boring. It was boring as hell yesterday. You could go out and mow a little bit and then come back and see if Morikawa or anybody else would get in the neighborhood of the eventual winner, the two-time now green jacket holder, wearer, sporter. But it never happened. That was a dominant performance. And by the way, too, shout out to Adam Shank. Adam Shank of Vincennes, Indiana, of South Knox High School and Purdue University, finished 12th, which means he gets to go back to the Masters next year. That was his first. That is a job well done. He was kind of not so much like Tin Cup because he didn't go for it. What was Don Johnson's character in Tin Cup? He was just moving right along with par after par after par. You know, remember when Tin Cup, the Kevin Costner character, would go for it, and Don Johnson's character would just look for the par. What do you got, James?
The character's name is David Sims.
David Sims. Very David Sims-like. And that's good, too. Because that just means you're consistently good and you get to go back. And shout out to our guy from South Knox High School. That's outstanding. All right, a lot of hoop. A lot of conversation in general. Yeah, I know. How many sycamores remain? I don't even know what the count is right now. Do you count me? If you count me, maybe 5. Julian Larry and Jason Kent going to Texas. I'm assuming that Avila and Swope go to St. Louis, and Conwell, maybe Conwell's at IU, who got Miles Rice, and then a wait word on Ballo. And then I saw where Boogie Flan, who was heavily recruited by IU, got released from his declaration of attending Kentucky. Letter of intent is what I wanted to say there. A lot going on in hoop. All right, 239-1070. You and me on the other side. The stream, the app, it's HD Radio. Inside the AAA membership lounge via YouTube Live, and just getting started on what is a glorious Monday. This weather, come on now. There's no way we can go back to anything less than this. It is unfair. Today and yesterday, and for that matter, Saturday, incredible. No way. Mother Nature treats us that way. We can't go back to the 40s and wet and cold. We got to stay right here. Hopefully you will too. 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
Business. It's all the things that keep this world turning.
Ride with JMV.
I fart in your general direction. Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelled of elderberries.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Hey, welcome back. Thank you for joining us. James over there, I'm John. What a glorious Monday afternoon it is out there. Wow. Great weekend, too. Tony East, top of the hour. Pacers, Bucks, that first-round matchup. We'll have you covered on that. Hopefully, by the time I'm off here at 6 o'clock, we know a time on Sunday. We know it's going to be on Sunday. Just no time yet. That would be game number one. You've got the play-ins coming up this week, which, by the way, in the Western Conference holds a great deal of drama. Not bad at all. A ton going on. JMV, the Pacers trading Buddy was good for seeing into the future. A void is there. Better see it now than November. Listen, Brian, I'm maybe alone in this. I still wish Buddy was on the team. I understand why. I understand the motivation there, but shot maker, you know how I feel. There's really not much of a need for me to get in on that, but I would just tell you that for me, and knowing that you were going to lose him for nothing but what he would also add to this, shooting-wise, coming off the bench, I know he was a pain and you had to. Just him as a player and then losing Matherin, that's tough. But I will tell you, they're getting a lot off the bench. They're getting a lot off the bench from T.J. McConnell, a lot off the bench from Obi. Remember how I told everybody, no trading Obi. Don't trade Obi. I'm going to tell you this. Obi is perfect here. I know he's going to be on a schedule to get paid again, but he is perfect. He's perfect for this team. He is perfect for this community. He gets it. He's a fun-loving, jovial dude. He works every conceivable angle for the better here. Hey, JMV, during your opener, you're not calling the first playoff game for the Pacers a must-win, especially if Giannis is out in game number one. I don't even think, Jeremiah, I have to. I think the rest of the NBA world will. They play on Sunday in Milwaukee, and there's no Giannis. Basically, all of the NBA world will expect a win. I don't want to put the Pacers in that category because when they're supposed to, they've had struggles. I think maintaining that edge is really important for this group. Hey, JMV, off the sports topic for a minute, you mentioned SNL. Did you see the Beavis and Butthead Gosling skit? I did. It was really good. I don't know why, but when you have on SNL or when you had on In Living Color, when you have live shows where the participants, the actors, the comedians, when they break up laughing, and I like Jimmy Fallon would laugh at anything. You want Jimmy Fallon in your audience as a stand-up comedian because if you would like make armpit fart sounds like doing your armpit, he would laugh at that. So that's different. Like Fallon would laugh at anything, but I like to see the actors and the comedians break up like that. That's funny. Now, that was some good stuff on SNL. I didn't watch it in its entirety, but I saw the highlights of it. It was solid material. DeForest Buckner gets extended. You know, all this conversation we've had, like DeForest Buckner to me is a guy that you want and something that you absolutely understand. He's a guy that has been good for this team. He does need more around him. Those are the things that you try to understand when they don't happen. Like, that's the difference, I think, in what we see, for example, going on in Houston compared to what's going on here in Houston. They're saying, all right, with our rookie quarterback, we're going to surround him with the most while he is getting paid like a rookie quarterback. Here it's, all right, we know what has happened here, but we're going to bring these guys back and add some pieces from the draft and hope that Anthony Richardson, I would guess, is stratospheric upon his return. We get a lot of time to talk about that, but in general, the pressure is on any quarterback. But it is going to be especially large on Anthony Richardson this year. Talk about that and more with Stephen Holder in the 5 o'clock hour. JMV, how pitiful would that be for Buddy to want out of here and they could miss the playoffs? I definitely expect Miami and Philly to get out, but crazier things have happened. Yeah, he was. Part of me wants to say, all right, you just don't trade commodities like that regardless, but I do get it. I think it's understandable, though, Nick, considering what Philly has had to go through, just being able to survive that much time without Embiid. So given the circumstances, you're not happy where you are, but you're probably kind of happy where you are, if that makes sense. Because it could have been a hell of a lot worse. All right, 239-1070. Tony East, NBA first-round Pacers Bucks series, and Caitlin Clark, drafted by the Fever. That's coming up later on tonight. Tony East will talk about that in the 4 o'clock hour. Matthew's at 239-1070. Hello, Matthew.
Good afternoon, JMV.
How was Kwity Paye on Saturday?
Oh, he was wonderful.
Great. Sounds like, by the way, Academy Sports and Outdoor in Greenwood. That was the grand opening.
Yes, it was. He could not have been nicer.
No, he's a good dude. He really is. He's got to have more good dude production, more consistent good dude production. You got good dude, which is good because he's a good dude, but good dude needs to produce more efficiently, effectively, and consistently, right? That's what we're looking for.
Well said.
Thank you very much, Matthew. What else you got?
All right, as you know, is the WNBA draft tonight. I got to know, who do you think is taking Mackenzie Holmes, if anyone?
That's a good one. I hate to say this. I don't think anybody does.
Yeah, I was afraid you were going to say that.
Because now
I was hoping you would lie to me, though.
Yeah. Because it's going to be a year in waiting, I don't think anybody does. I think people will wait to see. I think she'll have to. I don't know in what fashion she'll have to show, and it stinks because she's shown so much collegiately. But the timing of all this really, for her going into this draft, could not be worse. So here's hoping I'm wrong, right?
Yes, let's hope so.
What else you got, Matthew?
I think that's pretty much it for that, for now.
You got it. You call anytime, Matthew. Thank you very much.
All right.
Jack, really quick, give it a go here at 239-1070. Hello, Jack.
Hey, I think you're being a little hard on the Buddy Hield trade. We did get Dougie McBuckets on that. That was really cool. Why do you think he's still playing when his plus-minus has been so terrible all season?
You know what, though? Let's be honest here. Today's not the day to go in on Doug because he had a good game yesterday.
That's true.
You got to embrace those good games. No. We're on this.
This is like 160 points we scored.
We are. Yeah, I know.
No pressure.
Like anybody could get out there, I think, score. Yeah. But I'm with you. I'm with you on that. We're on the same page. There was no alternative in how they were going to be able to handle Buddy Hield, and that's unfortunate because he could add a lot in the postseason, especially considering Bennett Mathurin being done for the season. But yeah,
I know
Dougie had a good game yesterday.
More than Jarris Walker. I think Jarris Walker has more upside to add. I don't know.
I think Rick evidently made that determination on Jarris Walker long ago this season. Yeah. So yeah.
Moot point.
You got it. Anything else, Jack?
No, that's it.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate it. Yeah, that determination on Jarris Walker was made some time ago. You can't get mad really at anybody yesterday. Everybody came out and did what you wanted to see them do. But now I love Rick Carlisle coming out and saying, hey, we're not going to get all happy here. Nobody can get happy. Speaking to his team because he's 100% right. I mean, hell, I expected them to win 46 games. So you were going to be here anyway. And with that production comes a level of expectation. And let's just say, for example, on Sunday there's no Giannis. There is your expectation. How are you going to deal with that? How are you going to deal with a game in which everybody suggests you should win? That is where we have found the most issue with this team this year. I thought Rick Carlisle was speaking directly to them regarding that yesterday. And good for him, he should. Quick break. We shall return. Tony East, top of the hour. Stephen Holder, 5 o'clock hour. Don't go anywhere on this glorious Monday afternoon. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
If you love spring in Indy but hate the paint.
Ride with JMV. 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
James over there, I'm John. I thought the Masters was pretty boring. Now, a dominant performance, don't get me wrong, but boring. There's a lot of drama there. Pacers and Bucks round number 1. Game number 1 starts on Sunday. Giannis, according to Shams, the Bucks feeling doubtful early in this round number 1 about his participation. Which it does. It puts the pressure on the Pacers. Got to keep in mind, too, there are a lot of people out there that would go ahead and pick the Pacers anyway. And when you're looking at all these first-round matchups, the first thing you look at is, all right, so where could the upset come from here? We saw that on the TNT set last week with Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal. But if you don't have Giannis in game number 1, I would have to bet the entire NBA landscape, all the media will be going, yeah, this is the one that the Pacers have to get. Or, as I've mentioned too, this is a game the Pacers are supposed to get. And there's where we find a lot of the issues. If you're going to take issue with things that have happened over the course of this season, I would think you start with games in which they were supposed to win or you felt really good about. And I know we're talking about, much lesser teams here. But still the general storyline applies. Don't play down. Don't relax. Success was there with Giannis or not this season. And the other thing you realize for a team that basically is without playoff history with the exception of Miles, there's no been there and done that for this group. There is a way that you handle it. And you can make an argument that even with Giannis, the Bucks handled the regular season like a team that was anointed to go deep into the postseason. You cannot overlook any of this. Figure out what has pissed you off about this matchup and then use that as some motivation too. The running back to the locker room to get the ball that Oscar Tshiebwe had. Or Marcus Johnson saying you're a flopper. Or having Giannis, finger wag in your face if you're Halliburton about, why he went back there and acted like a complete idiot. All this stuff. I just don't want them to hear, well, this is where you go for this first round upset because, look, the best player may or may not be participating, may not participate in game number 1. And that was a reason why I think you saw Rick Carlisle go the angle in addressing the media yesterday in which he did. That's exactly what he needed to do. Quick break. We shall return. Tony East about that and more and the WNBA draft later on tonight. We'll ask him the question about Caitlin Clark, and Matthew brought up Mackenzie Holmes, too, out of IU. We'll ask Tony about that and Tony and the matchup with the Bucks and the Pacers in round number 1. That and more. And Stephen Holder in the 5 o'clock hour, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Y'all ready to get loud?
NMLS HD3, W228CX, Indianapolis.
The Ride with JMV.
Excuse me, Robo. Any special message for all the kids watching at home?
Stay out of trouble.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Summer breeze makes me feel fine. Blowing through the jasmine in my mind.
It is quite the summer breeze today, yesterday as well. Saturday was nice, too. And good fortune takes place for the Fever later on tonight, where they will receive and then take advantage of the opportunity of selecting Caitlin Clark out of Iowa, number 1 overall. She will join the team, and about a month later will be out on the floor for the Indiana Fever. That comes with a great deal of hype. That's the good fortune. And then you got to go to work and win some games to follow it up. So the Pacers, on the other hand, have worked into the 6th seed. They get Milwaukee in round number 1, game number 1, time to be determined of starting on Sunday in Milwaukee. You might suggest that with a hampered, at least from what we have heard, calf situation with Giannis, they could also be the recipient of good fortune. However, you don't look at it that way. You look at it as the team that you got under the skin of this past year, that you pissed off, that you got mad, they got angry. You don't stare at how dominant you were in the series this season. You look at them as the team that they were supposed to be at the start of the year. And you don't rest on this, even with that good fortune. That and more on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline right now. It's our friend Tony East who joins us. Just a variety of ways. Locked On Pacers and more. You can find his work. He is with us now. You get what I'm saying regarding the Pacers. You might get some good fortune, but in that game 1, if there's no Giannis, everybody had the Pacer lean anyway in this series nationally. Then everybody's going to go with the Pacers. And I thought that's why Rick directed some of those comments yesterday after the game to his guys, saying, you don't relax here. I mean, you maximize what you have built, going 6-2 in the final 8 down the stretch, and you take it to Milwaukee starting on Sunday. Anything relevant there of what I just said?
Yeah, I think that it's a very fascinating first-round series because, you know, it's very natural to say a lot of the things that you just said, that I have said, that, you know, they played the Bucks very well this season, beat them 4 times, crushed their weak perimeter defense, made it to the point where we were using the rivalry word about regular season games, right? Like, that is quite the feat in the NBA these days. But that can't matter, right? Like, Giannis is still on that team, and his injury is definitely a factor that the Pacers might benefit from. But, you know, they haven't been here before, and they've got to prove it, right? They've got to be ready to go and not be happy just to be here. And it's totally different. Pascal Siakam was not involved in any of those 5 games, and Buddy Hield was in all of them, and the Bucks had a different coach, and there was no Patrick Beverley or Doug McDermott, and some of that stuff may seem minor, but it matters. And the Bucks have been there, done that. They have like 6 or 7 players from their old championship team. Like, there are so many fascinating dynamics of this series, and yeah, Carlisle is, I think, right to say they don't want to be happy to be here. They want to win this thing and think they can, and at their absolute best style, which has been shown against the Bucks many times this year, they can beat anybody. So I think it's going to be a fascinating series.
It's Tony East who joins us on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. SI Pacers, Locked On Pacers, Forbes, WTHR.com, and more. Talking about the Pacers, and then we'll get into the Fever and what is going to be a spectacular, I'm sure, a life-changing moment for this Fever organization coming up later on tonight. However, I did want to bring this up. Among the first-round series, and obviously we got the play-ins beginning tomorrow night, which out west has a great deal of intrigue, but is there anything that has more of the soap opera, the melodrama, as this going into matchup has between the Bucks and the Pacers?
That's a good question. The only contender would be Nuggets-Lakers, just because they played in the conference finals last year. I'm trying to think of every series now. I mean, we've seen a lot of Clippers-Mavs before, but definitely not as much melodrama anymore. So I would say so, especially given what happened this season. And I actually think that this might be overthinking the playoffs a little bit, but I'll be curious how much of a test case this can be for, like, the in-season tournament and how the emotions of that still matter, right? If these teams still just hate each other and they're ready to go, because that's when this kind of started bubbling, is when the Pacers beat them twice in the in-season tournament this year.
Yeah, I just don't look at any of these other first-round matchups as having that juice as this one does. But you're so right in talking about how dramatically things have changed on both sides. Just if we talked about Siakam being here when he wasn't then, and Doc Rivers being here when he also wasn't then.
For sure, and it's funny because I actually think one of the biggest changes in dynamics is a smaller thing, but Patrick Beverley, he's a shorter guy, but he tries his tail off on defense and actually is disruptive in a way that no one on the Bucks is, and that it's not like a huge change, like he got traded for a second-round pick, but the thing they sucked at against the Pacers all season was perimeter defense was just awful for them, right? Like, between Dame and Beasley and Connaughton and Campaign, whoever else they had at guard, I mean, every game, Halliburton was great and several other guards along with him. Mathurin was really good in Milwaukee one night. I was up there. McConnell was good against the Bucks all year. Hield had nice – like, Nembhard was good. Like, they could just get in the paint and play how they wanted. And the Bucks' perimeter defense still has holes, right? Like, Lillard still plays a bunch and has lost his step, and a lot of those guys are still on the team. But it's changed because of the inclusion of Patrick Beverley. So I think that is a thing that actually is the biggest change in how the Pacers can exploit them and attack them. And obviously Halliburton's not, playing at the top 5 player level he was at the time either. But that is like the biggest change to me because, it felt like at first they made a big turnaround with Doc coaching them. Like they had a flimsy start and then were really good. But now they're back to being flimsy again. And so it's hard to say what the quality of their team is, but I think just stylistically that one's huge. And, of course, Siakam, it's hard to say what that's going to do because naturally he's the closest guy in size, you'd think, to the right player to guard Giannis. But you don't guard Giannis with one guy. It's 3 guys. It's a wall strategy, whatever. And so maybe that changes the dynamic of how they try to defend him or change things up there. There's just a lot that's different that – yeah, I think a lot of the same strengths and weaknesses apply for these teams, but the Pacers were saying it last night. They don't think they can look back at any of those games as a template for what they can do.
So you mentioned, too, the perimeter defense of the Bucks, and I'll get into that. And just in terms of them struggling to keep pace during the regular season with the Pacers and their offense, but that dynamic you mentioned with Pascal Siakam, you're talking about that on the defensive end against Giannis. But what does that do to the Bucks on their defensive end? You're talking about how inadequate their perimeter D has been. How does that dynamic of having Siakam and really having to check somebody significant, how does that play a role for them on their interior defense?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting because, we've seen before that, like last year, the Bucks got their stuff rocked by Miami, right? And there was a big talking point all series of, are they ever just going to put – and then Giannis was hurt for some of the series, but there was a talking point of, are they ever just going to put Giannis on Jimmy Butler? Is that going to be a thing that they do? And they never really did it. And some of the reason for that is obviously intentional, right? It sounds so obvious from the outside, but he's such a long, rangy, huge guy, Giannis is, that you almost want him to be able to disrupt stuff from everywhere and be able to come in from the weak side and just be around all the plays and be huge and long. And so that means that putting him on a star is different. He can't do that stuff. And maybe he slows down Jimmy Butler a bit, to use last year as an example, but then the rest of the Heat have a much easier time, and so that trade-off actually isn't worth it. So on one hand, it's easy to say, well, maybe Siakam against a good defensive front court with Middleton and, with Giannis and Brook Lopez isn't a great place for him to just find crevices and be Siakam and be awesome. On the other hand, he might be guarded by, an older, creakier Middleton or not Giannis in a situation that actually makes him really valuable in the series and forces the Bucks to kind of think about how all the matchups shake out and, who's on Halliburton. Okay, now all of a sudden Aaron Nesmith has a bunch of chances to slash. So I think that he does create maybe not a matchup problem for the Bucks, but just more of a situation where they think about who's on who in a way that wouldn't have been the case, obviously, if he wasn't on the team.
I was, Tony, thinking about this anyway. And even before the whole Giannis thing took place with this particular matchup, we're finding out what we found out this morning from Shams regarding, there being doubts about his Game 1 participation. I happen to think that Bobby Portis is going to play a huge role, and I'm looking at that from a Pacers lens right now, what does he do that the Pacers may struggle with dealing with? And really on both ends of the floor. He's not a great defensive player, but he is there. He is lengthy. He is tall. He is rangy. But offensively is where he makes it. Dealing with him, is that something that we should be thinking about more than we are right now?
Yeah, I mean, he's not like amazing at anything, but he doesn't suck at anything, right? So and that kind of player, when in a postseason setting, can be really valuable, right? Because they can fill in basically any lineup. They're not going to be subtractive or negative. And he's, getting older than he was when they won a title and isn't that as fast anymore. But like that team was desperate to keep him after that finals run because he was awesome for the Bucks in the playoffs then. And when I was in Milwaukee this year, like he was amazing in the first half, and this whole fan section for the Bucks is chanting his name. Like he's that kind of impact for Milwaukee at his best. He's just like tough, really tough in the post. And like Brook Lopez is a very good defensive player, but he's very positionally sound and disrupts actions and is, just good at a lot of stuff. But you don't think of him in the same way as Portis on that end, even though Bobby Portis can be threatening around the basket and he can shoot. Like they had a game against the Suns this year they won without Giannis where he was just raining in threes all night. He was one of their better players throughout the game. Like he can guard fives, but needs to be guarded by fours. And I think you're right, especially with Giannis out, he could end up being their fifth starter, that he could be an X factor in this one.
So Tony East, he's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. I mentioned I was going to bring this up too, and Giannis talked about this in two of those games where the Pacers go 4-1, in which he was participating in, where he and his guys, his starters, ran out of gas at the end, which is a reason that we see the Pacers playing at that high pace up and down the floor, which was great for them in this matchup earlier this year. But when things kind of died down a little bit, when it's more of a slower pace, playoff-wise, and more, of a defensive stop here or there, you think the Pacers are going to be able to maintain anywhere near that offensive pace that we saw throughout this season? And if they don't, how do they deal with that on the offensive end?
Yeah, that is a fascinating question to me that will come up in this postseason because last May, I will never forget this conversation. And this was the first – I mean, we all know the Pacers, wanted to make and do well in the playoffs this year, right? It's very natural progression of a team. But that was the first time last May at the draft combine, Tyrese Halliburton said it, I want to be in the playoffs next year. We want to be there. That's our goal. And then springboarding from that, he said, when I watch the playoffs, I'm talking to Chad Buchanan and Rick and Kevin Pritchard about what it's going to look like for our team next year. And it's a slower paced game. Our half court offense is going to have to be better, right? That was, 11 months ago now. And so he recognized that then, and that's a known thing. The playoffs are just a little slower because when you're playing the same team 4 to 7 times in a row, Siakam explained this to us last night, you get a big book of other teams' plays and obvious sets and actions that you got to be ready for, and you're really prepared for it, and you're locked in, and you know how your team's going to defend it, and it evolves over the course of a series, and there's counters and all this stuff that, if you're just playing fast, a team's going to be ready for that. Maybe the Bucks, who aren't a good transition defense team, aren't, which would be a little embarrassing in a postseason setting, but every playoff series, because the knowledge of what you're throwing at another team is better known, it's harder. You have to work harder to generate good shots or to get into your sets or just to beat a defense that's ready for what you've done for 82 games. And so I think that pace element maybe can be a factor, but I think if it's going to be a factor, it's going to be the Pacers. Every miss, they're sprinting right away. Every time the ball goes out into the crowd, they used to do this a lot more early in the season than they do now. They sprint to get it, to try to get into transition, even on random turnovers. That kind of stuff can be how they use pace to their advantage, because I don't think naturally in the flow of the game it's going to be as easy to do as it was during the regular season. And they love their random offense. They talk about that all the time. It's not going to be as easy for them to do that kind of stuff. If they can get it where the Bucks can't predict what they're doing and they know exactly what they're doing, yeah, their shots are going to look great and maybe they can wear them down, but that's a lot harder in the playoffs, right? And that's been the thing for all of time, and why talent and great one-on-one play can be really valuable, and maybe the Pacers will have enough of that to win and do well. But I'll be fascinated to see that. I mean, their pace was their identity for 2-3 months of the season until they slowly sort of adjusted to what they are now. And without that, or with less of that, I suppose, what do they look like? I'll be fascinated to see.
Yeah, we've joked back and forth on X and social media about, if you don't score 110, you're not going to win. And I don't know. Well, here's what I do know, and we've talked about this all year long too. Their defense is not going to rise significantly enough, and also what they give up in second chance opportunities is not going to go down significantly enough for them to lose a great deal from pace offensively, if you know what I mean here.
Yeah, they've got to be good on the boards, and the Bucs are big, right? Like they're going to be giving up size in a lot of matchups just naturally. So
and that's why they lost on Friday night to Cleveland. Now, that's a better game. You lose because of second chance. And, I mean, hell, one was a second chance with Strus, right? It was the only guy that went to the glass for whatever reason in that moment. I don't want to see them go down in flames because of this second chance opportunity crap.
Yeah, and that's one of those ones, like that Strus one's one of those ones where that's why, like, you talk about Brooke Lopez and rebounding with bigs all the time, but like that was Halliburton's man at the time, right?
Yeah, it was.
So it's everybody, and it's if you have size at every position, the Bucs are pretty big. Like that can be an advantage, but fans hope that their team in the playoffs, you don't have a moment like that where I think Mitchell shot the three that Strus rebounded, where a three goes up and everybody turns around and they're watching it, right? There's no jockeying for position or anything like that, and that was. That was just not a good moment. Like you can't have that you cannot have that kind of stuff in the playoffs. And rebounding has certainly been a bugaboo for them all season. And sometimes they can get over it. A lot of times they can't. And the Bucs are a very good rebounding team, right? At least their size is significant. They're about middle of the road in actual rebound percentage, largely because they don't offensive rebound very hard. Doc Rivers came in and tried to turn them around as a transition defense team, so they didn't hit the offensive glass as much. But maybe that helps out the Pacers stylistically. But on the defensive end too, like getting boards, getting extra chances on that end matters. Pacers were talking about the possession game already last night, right? Like getting more chances to score in the playoffs is a huge deal. So those little moments, like the Strus play was one play, but it kind of defined the game, right? The Pacers had one chance to take a lead against the Cavs, right? That's the possession right before that, and then they never got it back because of that Strus rebound. Like that can't happen in a playoff setting, but it's going to be a big factor.
Tony, two things that appear to me that could end up being hampering to this Pacer team in the postseason against the Bucs. To start would be the second chance opportunities, which we saw and especially magnified with Strus on Friday night in Cleveland. And the other thing is, let's just consider right now, for the sake of my question, that Giannis doesn't play on Friday, or check that on Sunday. I'm sorry. If he doesn't play, then all of a sudden that's going to become to many one of these should-win games. And we've known this season what has been an issue with the Pacers in should-win situations.
Yeah, I'm kind of just throwing out the 82.
Okay.
For my assessment.
I'm glad you did because that concerns me a great deal.
It's not even to give them credit. Like, I just haven't seen them in the playoffs yet. Like, if they play, if Giannis doesn't play in game one and the Pacers come out and they're down 15-2 in 4 minutes and they're not ready, and then you have to go back to thinking about the team the way you did. But like, I haven't seen them in the playoffs. I had like 3-4 of their rotation guys have never played a playoff game before. I just don't know, and that's not to give them credit or doubt. I don't know, and the Bucs I have seen in the playoffs, so I kind of do know what to expect from them, and a lot of Pacers players have. But like, I was talking to Aaron Nesmith in Cleveland before they played that Cavs game, and he's played in the finals before with Boston, right? And I didn't ask him to go into detail on this, but like, it just feels different with a new team, right? Like, you want that group to be there and make it and do that and rise to the occasion. It just feels different and a little more exciting, and especially for him, like in a much bigger and important role than he had back then. So even guys like him and Jalen Smith, who've played in the finals before, like, this is different. And Siakam's been in the finals before. I'll be curious how he feels. But I kind of want to just maybe that's just because of who I am, but you learn a lot about teams in the playoffs. Like, it kind of defines your path forward as a franchise. And we haven't had to do that when thinking about the Pacers for 3-4 years, but Now I think fans will remember, like, oh yeah, like this is how you determine like roster decisions and who to keep and how to build forward. And so it becomes more important, especially when you're a team at the talent level, to be there every year. So I almost want to just throw out the 82 or 83 or whatever, if you include the in-season tournament, and say, let's see who this Pacers team is in this playoff setting, and maybe if they have a lot of the same problems, then they're really obvious fixes come off-season time. But I don't know. I just kind of want to see it.
No, it's a good point, too, because I'll put it in terms of T.J. McConnell. Remember, so many people wanted to get rid of him, wanted to trade him, wanted to see other guys get his minutes. He's going to be taking away from minutes here and minutes there. And now look at the bench. You know, most importantly now, without Benedict Mathurin and certainly Buddy Hield being traded away, and what T.J. McConnell has brought game in and game out in the past month off that bench is something that a lot of people, with the exception of me, certainly didn't realize at the beginning of the season right now. That's going to be even more magnified in this postseason. So kind of a clean slate type of deal is what I gave McConnell with this team, and that's what you're doing with this team going into the postseason. I get it.
And the example I can give, too, that's kind of like very tailored but could end up mattering, like, you know, the first year of the Oladipo era, right? That team all season could rely on Oladipo to generate them shots and make the offense be good enough, you know, and they were the 5 seed and won 48 or whatever games. And then in the playoffs, the Cavaliers double-teamed Oladipo, and the Pacers had nothing they could do. Like, it took them several games to get over that, and they realized in that series, we need more shot creation on the team. And their big free agent signing that summer was Tyreke Evans, right? And, yeah, that signing didn't work out, but, like, they learned that from the playoffs. Like, it's just different. And you know a lot about your team and what its strengths are. Like, the regular season is at nothing, but that kind of stuff matters a great deal. That's why getting in for this Pacers team at this stage, they don't want to celebrate it, and I understand that, but for their path forward, to be in, to have at least a series of information about what it will take to make progress from a team building and even mentality perspective is so valuable to them, and I think that's very important.
He is Tony East. A very special moment coming up later on tonight, too, with the Indiana Fever, the WNBA draft. And, you know, obviously this is something that it hasn't been around here in a while. And I'm not talking about the player that Caitlin Clark is or the magnitude of height that she brings, but it's the good fortune for local fans around here to be able to embrace, because it has been few and far between, and we're going to see it on a grand stage later on tonight.
Yeah, 2 years in a row for the Fever of finally getting the luck, right? They made the playoffs as a 500 team in 2016, and that's the last time they made it. Losing record every season since, and even at their chances to win important draft lotteries, to get Asia Wilson, to get an Indy native and Jackie Young, whatever, has not gone their way at all. In fact, oftentimes going the opposite of their way and being, you know, among the worst luck in the lottery. Now they have 2 straight years of the best possible outcome of getting an absolute stud all-star starter in Aaliyah Boston last year, and like the name in women's hoops right now. And Caitlin Clark, back-to-back years, they're a potentially extremely snug fit together. They're both just terrorizingly good players, a young team with a new coach. Like it took a while, and it was really ugly at the low for the Fever the last couple of years, but it took a while. They finally have everything they need and the people in the right seat on the bus to seize the moment. Like, it all came together at the perfect time for them.
It did too. What like a lot of people have described how significantly the landscape will change, what Caitlin Clark will add just beyond her being incredibly good at playing the game of basketball. Where do we begin with this?
I'll predict for you now, if you would like for people that don't, you know, really know. Like, I bet maybe even all season, but I bet the first 5 to 10 Fever games have Pacer-sized crowds, right? Like that's a huge change for them in that arena, you know, and that's how, one, popular they'll be, but two, how good they could be, right? I don't know if they'll be good right out of the gate. They're still a young team figuring stuff out. They'll be much better than they have been, obviously, for the last 5, 6, 7 years. But, you know, that is just a seismic franchise change. Like, I don't remember exactly what the fan attendance average was a couple years ago, but it was something like 3,000-4,000. And so it's going to go way up, like immediately, right? And you've seen that in the – people are asking me almost every day about Caitlin Clark and this Fever team and what they're going to look like next year. Like, I think it's going to be so obvious immediately that it's all different. It's all way more exciting. and they're better, and a ticket worth watching all the time because she's that good, and Aaliyah Boston's that good, and they're going to be that good at some point soon.
Where's the hype that Caitlin Clark gets right now compared to anybody else that's a part of the WNBA?
Man, that's a great question.
I mean, how many women do you have to go with combined to compare to the type of hype that she's bringing tonight?
Yeah, well, so like in terms of talent hype, we're talking Asia Wilson, obviously. Aaliyah last year was close. Brianna Stewart, Maya Moore level of talent hype. In terms of obviously national popularity hype, I mean, this is the women's championship game. The rating numbers, you saw them. I mean, it was insane how much it smoked like every other game that we've ever seen at that level. So from like a national interest in the WNBA perspective, it's not even close. Like nothing has even sniffed this before. In terms of player hype, I mean, yeah, comparatively, it's only been, basically 3 or 4 former MVPs and potentially 2 B MVPs. So that's just what it is. And I think every team that's had back-to-back number 1 picks in W history has won a title. So that's what's at stake potentially for the Fever.
Yeah, I mean, and pop culturally speaking right now, there is no comparison. Like you can put together what Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi doing their thing or whatever, and it wouldn't right now equate to what she had. Yeah. It's just incredible the type of hype she brings all the way around. And then it's going to be up to her and this team to prove it on the court. But right now you can certainly embrace the hype that they're bringing just beyond the basketball level interest.
Yeah, for sure. And it's going to be really fascinating to see that part of what this looks like for them because, I mean, they lead the league JMV in national TV games this year. Like they're going to be, I mean, I'm guessing obviously no one knows how good they'll be, but I mean, optimistically somewhere between the 5th and 8th best team this year, right? Like, and they're going to be in everybody's target. We've seen DT, Diana Taurasi talking about the target that comes with being the number 1 pick and everybody wanting to beat you. Like, it's going to be tough right away, right? So, yeah, they're going to have expectations and all this, too, to go with their popularity, which will be a completely fascinating part of this because they'll be the watch. I mean, I mentioned the numbers for Caitlin's games in the tournament. Of course, they made the national championship game, but, like, in the Final Four, and, of course, they're playing UConn, but, like, Iowa-UConn was, like, twice as many viewers as South Carolina-NC State. And, of course, they both had a ton, but, like, she's that kind of draw, right? That kind of popularity is going to be fascinating to see what kind of trickle-down effects it has in terms of how other teams view them and what it means.
Hey, Tony, one more quick thing here. I was asked a question regarding Mackenzie Holmes coming out of IU and opting for surgery in basically what is going to be a red shirt season going into her professional career. What happens in the draft for her, in your estimation?
Yeah, it's really interesting that W actually has a better setup for her to be drafted than the NBA does because they have a mechanic called suspending a contract where you can just basically push it back a year but keep the player's rights. So what could happen is she gets picked somewhere, the team that picks her just suspends her contract for a year, and then they would have her the next year and she could be around. I don't know exactly how it works with her being like in facilities and rehabbing on site and stuff like that, but I think her chances of being drafted are still fairly high because of that. And ironically, the Fever, who have drafted an IU player 2 years in a row with Allie Patberg and Grace Berger, who have a largely full team, like kind of makes some good sense for that to happen. So I'm not saying it will, but it does make sense, and I'll be very curious to see how that shakes out.
So you think there's a possibility the Fever end up drafting Mackenzie Holmes?
Yes, her situation with the injury stinks, but I certainly think it's possible that it could happen. An IU person 3 years in a row.
It's wow. It's Tony East on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Again, SI Pacers, WTHR.com, Locked On Pacers, Forbes Sports, and more. Hey, that was really good stuff right there all the way around. We'll keep you obviously not too far away from us as we go into the first round of the postseason here, and enjoy the draft later on tonight with Caitlin Clark, and we'll see what happens. We don't have a game time yet, as we were talking. No game time for Sunday has been determined?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I think the play-in tournament's going to decide when all the games happen this weekend, so we'll see.
Hey, well done, Tony. I appreciate you, man.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
It's Tony East on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. We covered a lot of ground right there. We'll respond with you coming up on the other side. DeForest Buckner gets extended that, and we inch closer and closer to the 2024 NFL Draft. And Stephen Holder, all you need to know about that and then some. Top of the hour, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Business. It's all the
tailpipe. You're not gonna fall for the banana in the tailpipe?
It should be more natural, brother. It should flow out like this. Look, man, I ain't falling for no banana in my tailpipe.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Hey, welcome back. James here. I'm John inside the AAA Membership Lounge via YouTube Live. Yeah, what a day. What a weekend. Hope you had a great time and spent a lot of that outside this weekend. Weather spectacular. Yeah, JMV. Not only were we outside, but listening to the JMV takeover on Saturday night was outstanding too. I mentioned this to Jake a little bit earlier. You can always tell when we have great Saturday afternoon and evening weather days as we had. The uptick, it's packed anyway, but I could not even come close to getting to everybody on Saturday night. People have asked me before, so how many requests do you take in a 6-hour period? I think the high water mark, the record may be, and I don't even know how I end up getting all these songs on. There's only so much time, unless I'm cutting songs in half. And now, since on Saturday night, we have a lot more commercials because of the popularity of the show itself. I think in around 121, and that may be a little bit, I'd have to go back and look. Because when I first started, there wasn't really too many commercials. There were a couple of times in like the final 3 hours from like 9 o'clock on to where you'd basically have one commercial and that's about it. And then you can go crazy with that. But now you can always tell when the Saturdays are nice, the Saturday nights are fantastic. You get a lot of calls, and that was the case this past Saturday. At JMV, so I spoke to a friend about getting a heart scan on Final Four weekend. He said, quote, "I'm not as old as you and I don't have heart problems." He collapsed Friday and now is in intensive care facing open heart surgery this week. Get it done. Yeah, Meridian Medical Services will always help you out. That's why I'm always talking it up, because 2 months ago I went and I got a heart scan. I just want to make sure everything's okay. So you do too with my friends at Meridian Medical Services. And thank you, Damon, for the continuous spreading of the word right there. Exactly what we mean. JMV at 1075thefan.com. JMV, you brought this up a little bit earlier. I don't want that game number 1 on Sunday to turn into what the Pacers are supposed to be able to do. And I understand what Tony was talking about, just resetting it to the postseason from the regular season. But I don't think you all of a sudden just kind of lose the way that you start some of these games. And thank you, by the way, too, for the email. The other thing about that is it may be in a completely different way and certainly a completely different setting. And Milwaukee is a really good team. But you do have to deal with, the history, the memory, if you will, of just foul-ish types of starts. And believe me, there's always ways to come back. As I mentioned, double-digit leads are nothing anymore. But you tempt fate every time that you do it. And while I agree with Tony, you kind of blank canvas the start of the postseason. But that doesn't mean some of the issues that led to us seeing a lot of those rough starts are not going to prevail. I don't know if you just all of a sudden get rid of those characteristics because you go to the postseason. And believe me, going into Sunday, everybody, without Giannis, if that's the case, and even right now with a hampered, with an injured, with a bad calf, Giannis is going to be viewed that way. And remember, 4-1 in the regular season. There's not a lot of people out there that are going as in-depth as we are about this. They're not taking in consideration that Siakam is here for the Pacers or Doc Rivers is there for the Bucks. I don't even know if they're going to take in consideration nationally the soap opera effect, which is clear in this first-round matchup and really non-existent everywhere else. There's not much outside of the basketball where you would all of a sudden think, yeah, this first-round matchup would be compelling. What? But there are a lot of different avenues for the Pacers and the Bucks because of what they've been through, because of the pain the Pacers have been. I mean, hell, you can come up with 4 or 5 right off the top of your head. And I will say this, and everything always goes back to what we enjoy with the Pacers in the postseason, to the very early stages. Go back to the 1990s when it became an annual thing where the Pacers go to the postseason, but there was nothing better than that soap opera that was the Pacers and the Knicks. There is something about the NBA postseason to where you have a backdrop of other things going on that makes it more enjoyable. I'm not suggesting as a basketball fan that's what you hope for and that's what you have to have, because the basketball is compelling enough. But when you add that, that's like going to a great restaurant, getting yourself an incredible side. Like, it's like go someplace and find out that they have tater tots. Seriously. Yeah, there's a compelling side that we have. Yeah, we got tater tots. Okay, great. What are you going to get with your cheeseburger? Tater tots. That is the analogy I'll come up with right here. That's what you get in addition to basketball. And again, you get these first-round matchups are spread out, so there's going to be a lot of yip-yapping if any of this regular season stuff bleeds into the postseason between these two organizations. I love it. Really, that's how it should be. That's how you grew up as Pacer fans. Most of you, I grew up with them losing. But most of you out there of the younger generation, you grew up with them in those compelling matchups with the Knicks or with the Bulls. And other stuff was going on than just the basketball portion. I'm not suggesting this is going to be a matchup that will evolve into something of that level of interest. I'm just talking about the equation between the on-the-floor stuff and the off-the-floor stuff. And you have this in this round number 1 matchup unlike anywhere else. I can't think of anything that is off-the-floor-wise going to be as compelling in this first round of the NBA postseason as the Bucks and the Pacers. I think without question. I love that. BT says, yeah, man, it used to be about the music, dude, and then you sold out to the man. I tell you. It just kind of happened. It's been like 4 years of me doing that now, BT. It's amazing. I just used to go in because it was on a Saturday morning, and it was during COVID, and I was bored. I go, hey, you mind if I come in and do something? And then I went by what I was supposed to play. And now it's just like, all right, go in for 6 hours and completely take over this top-rated radio station and do whatever you want to do. Or no, better yet, do whatever they want you to do. You imagine that in this era? In this era, you get to do what you want. And I'm like the go-between right here. It's like, yeah, go ahead and do this. It really is like what we do right here. We do whatever you want to do here, too. I just kind of piper you through. But it is amazing. It is amazing Saturday what has evolved into fun for you, just like what has evolved into, over the past, basically going all the way back to 2004. What has evolved in fun right here, too, on a couple of different stations. But it is very like-minded. Now, when they shove all those commercials in there, I can't do anything about it. JMV here. I think the analogy wouldn't be tots. It would be extra fries you find at the bottom of the go-to bag. Oh, man, I don't know about extra fries. Cold and stiff. No, this is like finding out, all right, you get a side. Here's another side for you right here. You got that burger. That burger's unique. The burger is the matchup itself. All right, we love basketball. There's your burger. But what can you do as a side? Wait a minute. You said you had tater tots? Holy crap. That automatically makes you one of the best places of all time. I hate to say this, but, I mean, would Sonic exist if you didn't know that they would serve you tater tots? You're going to go sit outside, no matter what the weather is, no matter what the temperature is, you're going to wait on it right at a drive-in. But you know what? You're going to because they have tater tots. That is what is on the side of this match. You get a lot more soap opera-esque, melodramatic stuff going on than just basketball. And as they like to say, I'm here for it. Time, tip-wise, to be determined on Sunday with game number 1 of the first-round series with the Pacers and the Bucks. That will be up in Milwaukee. Pacers-Hawks from last night. We'll get back to that. And speaking of compelling moments, a big one for the Fever and a big one for the WNBA later on tonight. In the drafting number 1 overall of Caitlin Clark by the Indiana Fever, which is forthcoming. And we got a lot on the agenda, including DeForest Buckner getting extended, including not too far away the NFL 2024 draft. And top of the hour, Stephen Holder shall explain. And I know some of you wanted to bring up the Chuck Strong Gala and talk about luck. I don't want to. Is that okay? I don't want to. I am glad that you raise money. It's a fundraiser for the best of reasons. That's good enough on its own. I just don't want to double back in 5 years and get back to where we were. All right? I know a lot of people do. I just don't. That okay? That's like me. Like, all right, so what do you want to hear on Saturday night? You wanted to hear Earth, Wind, and Fire? Well, me too, and that's fine. But I'm going to go ahead and do the Gap Band right here. Is that okay? It's not how it happens, but that's in close proximity. Quick break, we shall return. It's 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
With spring just around the corner, Invisible Fence brand doesn't want you to be left behind.
JMV.
Have you ever killed anyone?
Yeah, but they were all bad.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
James over there. I'm John. Big night for the Fever. Big night for the WNBA later on this evening. Caitlin Clark will be the number 1 overall selection and a member of the Indiana Fever. Now, Tony East was on a little bit earlier because we had a question from Matthew regarding Mackenzie Holmes at IU. Of course, surgery going to be out this season. But he had mentioned maybe the Fever, they could be a team that would step up and draft Mackenzie Holmes out of IU. That's later on tonight. A lot of Pacers-Bucks conversation, too. Stephen Holder regarding DeForest Buckner getting extended. That's coming up at 5. Sean writes this, so have your DMs been quiet regarding Miles and TJ lately? And there's no doubt. I will say this, and I will say it once again. I have never understood, never, even with mammoth frustration, why anybody would say the crap as some of these fat slob clowns do about Miles. I have no idea why. Wants to be here, works hard, plays hard out there. It's another great moment. I'm just talking about the off-the-court stuff. He is a hell of an ambassador for the Pacers and somebody that loves to be here. And there's always been that whine and that cry, why don't people want to stay? They always want to leave. Well, you gave him, not you, just a small fraction of idiots. Gave him plenty of reason to want to leave. But you're fortunate a couple of different ways that he didn't and that an offer sheet didn't go through. Or got picked. I shouldn't say didn't go through. Got matched by the Suns. Nah, man. I mentioned Obi Toppin being great. He is great for this franchise. Miles is fantastic for this franchise. TJ McConnell is fantastic for this franchise. And I continuously have to argue those points with some out there. It is ridiculous. I do know this. I know that it's just people that don't know a basketball from anything else. But it's amazing. All three of those are easy to figure out. Are easy. Yet some want to make it so difficult. And I just really, I have no alternative than just to believe that I deal with idiots. Just a very small percentage of the dumbest of the dumb regarding basketball. I don't know how any of those three would be so stinking difficult to figure out. Alas, I've been down that path. Quick one, we'll return. Stephen Holder. Why do I have to explain it over and over? It's funny. But you're right, though, Sean. It has been quiet for real. Stephen Holder, ESPN, ESPN.com. DeForest Buckner gets an extension. Got a draft coming up in the not-so-distant future. That and some tickets to give away, too. Don't go anywhere.
If you're unaware, T-Mobile calls them...
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
James is here. I'm John. Thank you for joining us. Sony East a little bit earlier regarding a defining night for the Indiana Fever with Caitlin Clark, number 1 overall. And we'll see where it goes with the WNBA as well. But it is a hellaciously large evening for the Fever. And as I mentioned, too, soak it up. It's good fortune. Few and far between with the good fortune over the years in recent history. Past 2 years, certainly with the Fever, and this year takes it to the next level. Pacers-Bucks coming up on Sunday, the start time of game number 1. It remains up in the air to be determined, and the word out of Milwaukee is that they're doubtful of Giannis's participation in game number 1. We'll see if that holds. There's a long time between then and now. However, the calf, as they say, can be a tricky situation. The moment and then in the future. So we shall see. The week leading up to that. Play-in tournament officially underway tomorrow. Really out west, there are a lot of really good matchups. Actually, a couple, I should say, because there's only a couple. But I think if you're going to have the level of interest in the play-in, it is certainly going to be out west. Got that for you as well. Tickets to give away, too. Tell you about tomorrow. Remind me of that coming up in just a bit. The AAA Membership Lounge via YouTube Live. Glad to hang out with with everybody in there this afternoon. Thank you guys very much for that. It's been an absolute pleasure, per usual. On a Monday, too, it's always a little bit more spirited on a Monday around here, which is good. Meantime, on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline from ESPN and ESPN.com, Stephen Holder joins us. So it was going to happen, certainly, and it happened today. Somebody that has been really good for this team defensively gets extended. So we're about to the point where almost everybody in the band is back, right? He was going to be back anyway, but he gets an extension. But, yeah, it's kind of going into that theme of having the band back together again, right, I guess?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, DeForest Buckner wasn't going anywhere. Hey, but before I go on real quick, I hate to change the subject real quick, but I'll come back to it. So, hey, am I late to this, or has this already been mentioned? But when you talk about Giannis and that calf, why is the first thing that comes to mind with me the Kevin Durant situation a few years ago, where he hurt the calf, and then he came back and played in the playoffs, and then we know what happened after that. Yeah. So I don't know if it's a similar injury, but you got to at least have some thought in the back of your head about that. So
yeah, that's why I mentioned it has implications in the present and in the future. Yeah, as that of Kevin Durant. So yes.
Okay, so I'm late.
No, that's okay. That is, I kind of looked at it from a Pacers standpoint of you've got a lot of people now believing, even with Giannis, that they can take this series. And the one position the Pacers have struggled in at times this year that we've talked about is being in those supposed to win situations, games that you – right. And I kind of want them still to have an edge. I like the edge that they've had against Milwaukee this season, and I want to see them maintain. So, I mean, is it good if he's not available? Absolutely. That will hamper the effectiveness of the Bucks. But I kind of like the edge the Pacers have brought this season against the Bucks, and I would hope they would be able to maintain that. So,
yeah, they definitely respond better under those circumstances, I think. But anyway, back to DeForest Buckner. So, look, I think this was one of those situations where there was no downside to doing this. He was already on the books for a lot of money. He hasn't shown any decline, even though he just turned 30 years old, so he's going to be 30 this season. So I think if you like what you've seen so far, then yeah, you want a couple more years of that, right? And so that's where they were at. He was already on the books for almost $23 million this year. So it wasn't. I don't know that it's going to have an effect on this year's cap number per se. We'll have to see when the actual details of the contract come out. But that's irrelevant, to be honest. He's earned it. He's a cornerstone. I thought there was a great stat I got from my friends over at ESPN Stats and Info this morning, and there were a number of them, but the one that I think tells you the most about him is he is number 4 in the number of double teams drawn among defensive tackles in the last few years. The only guys ahead of him are like Aaron Donald and like Chris Jones. But yet, despite that, he has the 5th most pass rush wins, meaning he won his matchup. And a lot of those matchups, I think 65% were double teams. That's a ridiculous number of double teams. And the guy still produces. So, I mean, well, what else can you say? You know, what else can you say? Look, they're doubling down on their guys. And to their credit, we can quibble about whether they need more. But to their credit, the guys they're retaining are very good players. Like, that's not really part of the debate, right? I think we all agree on that. Like, these are good players. The question is it enough? And we'll see. We will find out soon enough.
So Stephen Holder of ESPN and ESPN.com. He's with us via the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Where does DeForest Buckner rank in terms of playing his position around the NFL? We know how much he means to the Colts and what they want to do defensively, but how good has he been per his position across that NFL landscape?
No, that's a great question. I think he is – I think top 5 is probably a fair assessment. You know, he's getting a little older, so you end up comparing him against guys that are younger than him in some cases. But I would say overall he's probably in the top 5. It becomes sort of a preference thing. There are a lot of good defensive tackles. I mean, you're talking about the Christian Wilkins of the world. Aaron Donald is now retired, so I guess we'll take him out of the conversation. Chris Jones, I think, is the pinnacle right now. Once with Aaron Donald's departure, I think Chris Jones takes the mantle. He's the guy. But then you've got guys like Christian Wilkins. You've got Derek Brown in Carolina. You've got Cam Hayward has been always been really productive, though he's certainly getting older now. There's a lot of great talent at defensive tackle, which is why Buckner hasn't gotten that All-Pro consideration the last couple of years. Because he has had to battle against what is one of, I think, the most stacked positions in the NFL. So that's been, kind of a maybe not the best indicator of who he is when you look at All-Pro, just because there's so much other talent. But he's done the job. I should throw in, by the way, Dexter Lawrence, too, from the Giants. A very, very good player. Jonathan Allen, another one. He's a big double team guy too. Dexter Lawrence, number 1 in double teams. Like I said, DeForest Buckner right there. I think the double teams, the guys who get double teamed, those are the guys teams can't block. So, I mean, it's pretty simple, right?
Right.
We can't block you. We got to take 2 guys to block you. The list is Dexter Lawrence, Aaron Donald, Chris Jones, DeForest Buckner. Pretty good company.
Yeah. So, and we knew that was going to happen as well. And Stephen Holder joins us. I know we're still a little bit away from the draft coming up at the end of the month, but have you prioritized the direction you think that the Colts will go, especially early in this thing? And or I guess at 15, would it take knowing what transpires before? I'm just kind of curious the direction or the emphasis you think Chris Ballard is going to put on where they're drafting, the type of player they're drafting coming up. And again, understanding we're still a ways away.
Yeah, look, the tricky part is obvious, right? I mean, there's so many scenarios that can play out when you're talking about pick number 15. But I think you're looking at it this way. Here are the things I'm looking for. What happens at wide receiver? How, what order do those guys go in? And and how many of them come off the board. If any of those, I don't know, top 3 maybe wide receivers are still there, then that has to be a discussion, right? I think we're talking about we're obviously, I don't anticipate Marvin Harrison Jr. being there, but I'm just saying, there's Malik Neighbors as well. I don't anticipate him being there either. Rome Odunze, I don't think he'll be there, but I'm just saying, right? There's a lot of value at that position because there's like elite talent at that position, but there's 3 of them. And, so are all 3 going to go? That's just a question. Then I think it goes to defensive back, cornerback. What is the situation there? Quinton Mitchell right now, the projections are that he goes first, the prospect out of Toledo. The question for me is, does he go before he gets to Indy? He could. He certainly could. But there is certainly a scenario where he's still there. And if he's your number 1 corner, I don't know if he is for the Colts, but let's just say he is. If he's your number 1 corner and he's sitting there staring you in the face, that is a really hard thing to pass on. It's a position of need. You're getting possibly the best player there. I don't know. That's a win, right? You would absolutely celebrate that if you've got the number 1 corner in this draft and you're the Colts. That's a great scenario for you. So I think that's probably the most likely scenario. Look, I've been asked a lot about Brock Bowers. I go back and forth. I don't know that he'll be there, but he's certainly an interesting proposition to think about whether he's there or not. I go back and forth on whether they would do it, because I do think that tight end is not a position you see drafted in the top half of the first round very often. It doesn't happen all the time. It happens from time to time. And I think from a positional value perspective, it's not a position that ranks super high unless you have, a Kelsey or that type of player, George Kittle, et cetera. So I don't know. He's a fantastic college player for sure. I don't know where the Colts have him ranked, how they see him. I think if he's there, I would be fascinated to see what the Colts do because I do think Shane Steichen could really exploit a player like that against opponents.
Stephen Holder's with us. Do you have a similar, I guess it would have to be described as a deeply rooted positive belief in this secondary, as I would guess right now as it stands the Colts have?
No, I don't. I don't think I'm on the same page. However, no, I'm not all in.
Well, it's going to lead to another question I have, but yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
But here's what I would say is that I do agree that there's upside, but that's a dangerous word. That is a dangerous word. And many games have been lost by banking on upside, not just here, but everywhere, right? Lots of teams have made that mistake before. I think there could be right. There is a scenario where they're right. Okay, let's not pretend like these guys are terrible. We just don't know. We haven't seen enough. Now, I don't know anything about Juju Brents. I've said this every week, but that's the problem. I need to know more, and we can't know that. We can't know that before the season starts. You can believe that he's more than we have seen, but it still takes belief as opposed to evidence. I think with Anthony Richardson, for example, right, there's a lot of – you have to take a little bit of a leap of faith there because you haven't seen a lot. But what you saw was so good that really the question is health. I think with Juju Brents, what you saw, there wasn't much, but there was also like a range of outcomes, some good, some bad, some in the middle. And so that's the problem. If he had been hurt, but yet when he did played great, I think this is a different conversation. But that was not the case. His performance was very mixed at best. So that, I think, makes it more challenging.
All right, here's the other question I had playing off of that. So we heard Shane Steichen, he said that to me, he said that to you as well. The continuity as being the reinforcement to keeping Gus Bradley here. He loves continuity. You can add the continuity personality-wise, but can you go about maybe being a little bit more nitpicky on how some things have been handled defensively in the past, scheme-wise, compared to how you may make an adjustment or two moving forward? Might we see that even if we didn't see a change in the continuity at defensive coordinator?
Maybe. I think he had a young secondary, and I think that has to be a consideration when you talk about the kinds of things you do schematically. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you don't want to put too much on those guys, particularly when guys have been in and out of the lineup. To talk about Juju Brents just now, for example, he had very little time on task in training camp. So, how do you get a guy like that up to speed when you're adding more layers, to the scheme and asking him to do more? That's a tough thing to do, right? So I do think the young secondary could have played a role. I also think it's true that Gus Bradley is kind of who he is now. So let's not pretend that he's going to turn into somebody else. Now, the thing you have to understand, or the listeners have to understand, is that Shane Steichen essentially endorsed that approach. I mean, we asked him at times, I think on multiple occasions, asked him about, the lack of aggressiveness on defense and was he okay with it? And he actually seemed fine with it. I think it's a philosophical thing. From a philosophical perspective, I came away with the impression that Shane Steichen actually agrees. Maybe not to the same extent as Gus Bradley, I don't know, but just in general, he doesn't seem to be opposed to taking a conservative approach defensively and to not be very aggressive. So we'll see. We'll see if they're right about that.
It's Stephen Holder of ESPN and ESPN.com. He's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Defensively, this team, broke a record with sacks. Is it fair to view sacks and consistently getting after the quarterback as a little bit different here? Because we still kind of sit, to me, on the thought that they need more. In what was a record-breaking season, doing something we've always wanted to see them do and they haven't forever, it still led us, I think, down the path of wanting more, consistently getting after the quarterback there. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think you do want to see a little more. Look, sacks are great. Okay, they're wonderful, no question about it. The other part of the equation, though, is when you get the pressure. Okay, and are you consistently creating pressure? It's less about sacks and more about pressure. Now, I would say to their credit, they have I'm actually looking at it right now. Their pass rush win rate was pretty good. They're number 5 in pass rush win rate, which means guys are winning matchups. They did face some quarterbacks who got rid of the ball quickly, so teams throw it quick on them. That's a factor. And then there's also the reality that the coverage wasn't always good. Okay, that's also a factor. I think if the coverage is better, those sacks are a lot more meaningful, or the pass rush numbers generally are a lot more meaningful. And I just think when the coverage isn't up to snuff, it's hard for the pass rush to have the same impact, frankly. So that's where they've got to work. I mean, they've got to. I think the work has to be done on the backside, to be completely honest.
It's funny, and Stephen Holder joined us. The way that I look at it, and sometimes, really, of these 7 years, the past 6 with Chris Ballard tends to run a little bit together at times. Is there, and I know after the reboot, this is really not saying a great deal, but is this going to be the most defining season in his tenure here? And just considering what is happening within his own division, especially in Houston, compared to the continued path he has taken in building this team, is this going to be the most defining moment we've seen with Ballard here this particular season?
It will be most likely, but I actually think for a different reason.
Okay.
I think it's because he has had to this point, understandably, and I have no issue with this, he has had to this point a very clear reality that has kind of blunted the counter arguments about his performance, right? Which is, look at the quarterback situation. Now, some of that is his hands are dirty too, right? You could have done something different. You could have made different decisions. But whatever. Like, they were trying to get that figured out. They swung and they missed on a couple occasions. Whatever. Okay, that's fine. They were desperate. Now, this year, if Anthony Richardson's healthy, you have your team. So the trajectory of the team should be evident this year. If that trajectory is not good, then I think you no longer have that argument, about, well, we just got to get the quarterback right. Well, I mean, this is the quarterback, right? So this is not about Anthony Richardson necessarily. I'm just saying that the results of the team, if the team results are not there, then that's going to reflect on Chris Ballard more than anyone else, I think. So from that perspective, I agree with you. I do think that, look, Houston's a little further ahead. And I said this last week, but I'll repeat it again here. I think Houston's a little further ahead just by virtue of C.J. Stroud being ahead. They know what they got there. The Colts think they know what they have in Richardson, but let's not pretend like they're on the same footing. They're not, because C.J. Stroud had an entire season. Certainly the Jaguars should be ahead, but who the hell knows where they are? I don't know. They got their own issues. But I think Houston's the topic of conversation for sure. No question about that.
I know what you're saying right there. I think and they drafted before the Colts, so automatically you're accurate about that. I do think Houston has put itself ahead of the Colts by doing what they're doing. Right? I don't think it all comes down to just quarterback hierarchy here or when they were – you know what I mean? That's why I think this is such a defining moment, because within your own division, a team that came in here and beat you on your home field to win the AFC South, something you hadn't done since 2014, is taking a decisively different path in what they believe is building a winner. And this, I think, is even more magnified because you're talking about a team that's your rival within your division. And if this doesn't work out for the Colts, this may be one of the worst of all time here. This is where, to me, what makes it more interesting than we have seen of the off seasons in the past.
Well, look, it's a referendum, is what you can call it. It's going to be a referendum on the team building styles. There's no doubt about that. And I do think Houston, in a couple occasions, in a couple instances, I should say, they needed to make those moves because they had some departures. But then they went a little further than that. So it's not all a result of departures. They didn't lose one of their top receivers, and they went and got Stephon Diggs, right? So, it's about more than just their departures. But there were some departures. The Colts had basically no departures. So they were dealt a little bit different hands, but the Texans went further in making up for their losses, certainly. So, yeah, I do think their tactics were completely different. There's no doubt about it. And when the story of this season is written in the AFC South, that will be in Chapter 1, how the two teams governed themselves in the offseason. There's no doubt about that.
So, and ultimately it always comes down to the quarterback. So whether the quarterback, and we've seen what Stroud can do and how he can lead in getting to the postseason. And your belief is a similar belief as to what the Colts have in Richardson. There is just no hardcore truth or examples. You have seen enough of it right now. So, yeah, it is.
I think that this is very subjective, but I would argue that the Colts 1 through 53 last season had a better roster. I think probably in some cases a significantly better roster than Houston. The quarterback made that much of a difference is the point. So they got to hope their quarterback, they being the Colts, they got to hope their quarterback can lift them the way that CJ lifted Houston. And we saw what a quarterback can do. We saw the difference he can make. Richardson, by the way, he has some things going for him. Look, he's got an entire offensive line coming back. I mean, that never happens in the NFL. He has his entire offensive line coming back. He's got all his offensive playmakers. He's got Jonathan Taylor healthy, coming off not coming off offseason surgery. So he has a lot going for him. The environment's good for him to succeed offensively. So we'll see. I like his chances, and they have good infrastructure around him. But again, we can talk and talk and talk. He's got to do it.
Hey, by the way, in closing, off-season stuff is ramped up a little bit over there on West 56, right?
Yeah, we will be out there tomorrow. In fact, you're going to hear from quite a few players tomorrow. Shane Steichen and a bunch of the players as well, so including DeForest Buckner. So that actually might shed some light on some things, and we'll get some updates and all that good stuff. So, yeah, eventful day coming tomorrow.
It's awesome. As always, I appreciate you, man, and we'll do it again next week, getting closer and closer to that draft. Thanks.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Stephen Holder of ESPN and ESPN.com and the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. So, kid from Bloomington South went to Bradley, played really well in Mo Valley. Connor Hickman. A lot of people thought maybe he would end up in Bloomington for IU. Evidently, Connor Hickman has decided on Cincinnati. So Connor Hickman from Bradley, the former Bloomington High School South basketball standout, is now taking that jumper from Bradley to Cincinnati. He made that social media announcement within the last 10 minutes. All right, quick break. We'll come back. We got tickets to give away. We'll do that and a lot more for you. And I'll give you a bit of an insight on what's coming your way tomorrow. We'll do that coming up next. 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
We all hear the radio ads about the IRS.
Get on the stool because he's under 5 feet tall.
93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
Hey, thank you for joining us, Stephen Holder of ESPN, ESPN.com. Podcast, a brand new podcasting center at 107.5thefan.com. Find all that there. Tony East a little bit earlier on a couple of different situations. One, certainly the Pacers and the Bucks. Round number 1 of the Eastern Conference postseason. Game number 1 happens on Sunday. Still yet to be announced the tip time for that one. Some doubts whether or not Giannis is going to be able to participate in game number 1. And I have gone over a variety of situations as to how you can look at this matchup, and so many of them are incredibly good. You get a level of on and off the floor stuff that no other first-round matchup, simply put, can give you. So it should be a blast. And Caitlin Clark will be drafted number 1 overall by the Indiana Fever in tonight's WNBA draft. And that will be a hellaciously big deal. So be prepared for that. I think Tony East had mentioned Pacers types of crowds for the beginning of the Indiana Fever season. And by the way, there's a quick turnaround, right? So you go from the draft tonight, and then basically a month later, everything gets underway. But that is a big deal, and we'll all follow that tomorrow. I am not going to be here tomorrow. Greg Rakestraw will be in for me, and I'm assuming James will line somebody up for Greg tomorrow regarding a reaction. Yeah, who knows? I know everybody's efforting Caitlin Clark and whomever. I tell you, the one person that I really want to have on the show, and I know James is efforting that as well, is last year's number 1 pick, Aaliyah Boston. Just listening to her talk basketball, I am down with that. And I don't want that to get lost into all this, too, because she is going to be is right now, but going to be even more so a fantastic player. So we'll see. I know Greg's going to be in here tomorrow, and he'll have you covered regarding all of that, too. Yeah, it was a good weekend for us Reds fans. Want to know why? It's because it was a weekend spent with our favorite baseball team on the south side of Chicago. And the White Sox stink. And that's good. Good for the Reds. Man, they stink. Reds on the road later on tonight. Pacific Northwest against the Seattle Mariners. But keeping track of the early season with the Reds, a lot of you Cubs fans out there, yeah, unfortunately for a lot of you White Sox fans because they stink, and a lot of you Cardinal fans because you stink because you're a Cardinal fan. Our early season baseball. I mean, really, when you look at Caitlin Clark going number 1 overall, it is the big sports story, and it is left alone tonight. For real. And then getting back to the end of the Pacer season yesterday afternoon, doing what they needed to do, and then doing it, performing emphatically against the Atlanta Hawks. Yeah, once again, I know we've talked about this at length. You could not have asked for a better season and a better compliment off the bench than what you have seen in T.J. McConnell. Again, he's not going to win 6th Man of the Year, but hopefully somebody out there recognizes how big he has been. If you were going to argue for a moment or debate for a moment the hierarchy of what is necessary on a night-in, night-out basis for the Pacers to perform at a high level, to win games, where would T.J. McConnell rank? I've said he's up there. Like, obviously, you have Tyrese Halliburton and then everybody else after, and you're going to say Siakam. You may say Miles. But T.J. McConnell is right up there, and if for nothing else, now you're seeing him score in bunches. I mean, hell, yesterday he was knocking down threes. But so essential, and you're going to see this even more in this first-round series. Historically speaking, the offense goes down and doesn't take an entirely tremendous backseat, but it takes a bit of a backseat where defenses ratchet it up in the postseason. But the Pacers still are going to win by what they do offensively. Defensively, late in game situations, okay. But they still are going to have a strong pace. And what is essential coming off that bench for them is that of T.J. McConnell. Because you look across the NBA, how many guys coming off the bench can be counted upon to keep up or maintain a level of pace offensively that Tyrese Halliburton starts with? And there are some moments when they're out there on the floor together. He's been great, absolutely great. And you know, I love it. It's not even so much that I want to do the I told you so thing. I just love it because he is proving to everybody his value. And for whatever reason around here, oftentimes it takes people around here more time to understand that than it does others. But I am now very glad that you guys understand that fully. I wish there was more nationwide recognition for what he is accomplishing right now with his craft than there will be. But at least everybody around here is finally unified and on board. It took a minute, even for the coaching staff. It took a minute, but at least you now fully understand. 239-1070. Brian is up next today. Brian, welcome to the show.
It's been a long time. I appreciate your show. I really like listening to you.
That is very nice of you to say.
Well, it's truthful, but you and Pat, was it McAfee or whatever? I'd like to see both of you guys on the same show at the same time. I'd see who would get the most words in edgewise.
Well, I would fail miserably in that category. Pat would have ownership of that for real.
No. I think you guys do a good job. But here's my caveat.
Okay.
Tonight, I'm a born and bred Indianapolis born and played against Mike LaFay, Jeff Robinson.
Yep.
I came out in the 80s when basketball by men was still being played, not this NBA crap. But anyway, I watched the women over the men. And I'm saying tonight the Fever are up against the wall in terms of everybody wanted the Pacers to draft Steve Alford, but they drafted Reggie Miller. And we know how that went. And what I'm saying, it's a food for thought. They can trade that one pick for maybe 2 first-round picks somewhere down the line, but because they need Boston needs some more help. You don't score without the ball. And if she gets in foul trouble, what are they going to do? And Caitlin, I'll just be honest with you. She's a shooter, but shooting from half court is not a high percentage shot.
Let me tell you this, though, too. She is as good a passer. She is above, as far as scoring and shooting is concerned, above everybody else. But I think what sometimes is lost in the shuffle is how good she is with the ball on the pass. This is a perfect compliment to Aaliyah Boston. Perfect.
But if Boston gets in foul trouble down low and you don't have any backup,
you create that somewhere else, not at the expense of Caitlin Clark.
Well, okay, but at the same time, we saw for the championship game, she's going to come up against size and quickness, and we saw what happened. And don't ignore that. So the athleticism is not all that. She could pass, but if she gets locked down and gets stripped by a person her size that's faster and bigger, then
Hey,
it
Brian.
is what it is.
Hey, Brian, I do have to run here. I want to tell you one thing, and you said some really nice things about me at the beginning, and I appreciate that very much. Okay, so please don't take this the wrong way, but trading Caitlin Clark for picks would be the dumbest basketball decision of all time.
Not without getting.
It would be the dumbest basketball decision of all time.
No.
It would be like I would say that like if the Pacers were to sign me, they'd sign me to a 10-day contract, and then I'd go out and guard Giannis in the first round. That would make more sense than trading Caitlin Clark. Seriously.
No, they'll. Everybody else in the league is going to catch up with all the other superior players that are coming out too. So
I don't know how she's going to work out long term. Hey, Brian, thank you again. Very nice words you said about me. I don't know how she's going to work out, but seriously, that would be the dumbest thing of all time to do. I was trying to think just without using me as a horrendous example. The things that you would be better off doing if you were the Fever. Or, like, if you were making that pick tonight, what are the other things you would be better off doing than trading that pick? I do realize this. Beyond all the hype, one of these days, like the first minute she hits the floor, there is going to be, all right, prove it. I mean, right now it's just all about the celebration and the hype. One of these days, she and they will have to prove it. But trading that would be the dumbest idea. I'm trying to think what else would be as dumb. I thought me against Giannis in round number 1 of the postseason, even with a bum calf, would be right up there. Yeah. So where Brian was going was they just need more bodies. Again, from what I have seen out of Clark and out of Boston, you are seeing the perfect complement for the number 1 pick a year ago by adding the number 1 pick this year with stratospherically everything else going on around her now. I mean, everything. Again, it's going to come down to performing and winning one of these days. But this is a signature moment of all time in a league and for a franchise in this league. All right, quick one, we shall return. I know you guys are going on that. I tried to make it as ridiculous as possible to even fathom trading it. So hopefully that analogy came across. Quick break. Back with you. Final time next.
The Ride with JMV.
Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
All right, the group is called Beat. It is a tribute to King Crimson. Steve Vai is a part of this, too, which should be outstanding. October the 30th at the Murat Old National Center. Number 9 at 239-1070 is going to win, because we like you. Thank you to our friends at Live Nation, too. JMV, now it makes all the sense in the world. It makes all the sense in the world when Brian would call in, and the first thing he said is how good you are. How good you are as a talk show host, where you need to be. And then bring up the worst take of all time. It all makes sense now, JMV. He likes you for a reason, right? Yeah, Brian just called in and was an advocate of trading number 1 overall. And as I mentioned, it would be the dumbest move of all time. And I didn't, listen, I rarely get anybody that says anything nice like that about me. And I'm not trying to run Brian off, but let's just face it, that would be the dumbest thing to do of all time. We're going to sign JMV to a 10-day contract, which you can, whatever. And then we're going to put him in, and yeah, he can play in that Buck series. Yeah, you know, we're going to send JMV with eligibility remaining to Indiana State, and he can be a part of the starting 5 next year. Just trying to think some of the dumb moves. Yeah, hold on. Yeah, you know, we're producing a porn out here in L.A., and we would really love JMV to be the star. So, yeah. Here's part of it that is weird. I don't claim to be like the biggest basketball guru in terms of watching, you know, the collegiate women's game. But obviously, you know the stars, and you watch Caitlin Clark enough to know. And I've watched Aaliyah Boston in her rookie season and knew her from South Carolina. I don't know if there is a better compliment for Aaliyah Boston. I mean, Caitlin Clark would be a great compliment to anybody, but as good a compliment to Aaliyah Boston. I mean, step back threes in the hype, one thing, but there is no better passer in college basketball than Caitlin Clark. Oh, this is a big deal later on tonight. I hated saying that, too. It felt good to have Brian come on the show and say, you know what? You are good. What a great talk show host you are. The only thing that was missing is you're so handsome. You're just so incredibly chiseled, well put together. You're just a great guy. And if only his basketball take would have been worthy of his take regarding me. Brian, we're going to have to give you a do-over. If only the basketball take would have been better. Damn it. Thank you, James. Stephen Holder today, Tony East, podcast 1075thefan.com. I'm out tomorrow. Greg Rakestraw is in. A historical evening for the Fever and the WNBA forthcoming tonight. We are going to be all over that coming up tomorrow. Beginning at 7 a.m. with the fellas. 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Have a great night.
Hey, it's Andy Sweeney for Universal.